Sometimes I think period films, they give it the filters or the sepia wash or the warmth to try to evoke a sense of nostalgia. And as Edward said, it's a good line where you sort of end up with a facsimile of what the past was. And I think a lot of when you watch a lot of period films, I think that in a way, it's easy for period to become very generic. And so we wanted to try to make sure that we could avoid that wherever we could here, and that it felt, again, as authentic as it could feel, and that we explored all the many layers of New York. So we wanted to make sure that we really highlighted, the lower income neighborhoods in Brooklyn, and we wanted to highlight sort of the big, robust marble world of the powers that be, and we wanted to sort of show the juxtaposition of them. And then we also just wanted to show all the various worlds that these characters inhabit. So we're up here in wonderful old architecture of Harlem, or we're out in, beautiful old, Victorian, Brooklyn brownstones. And so we're seeing a really beautiful range of sort of the residences of the time and the streets of the time. The vehicles, that's the most immediate and the biggest impact for bringing you into a period, but then also the signage for us. We've been fortunate enough that we could do a few exteriors, not quite, as big and grand as, as you'd hope to get on some, but I think we've done a really, really great job of picking a few pieces of blocks and corners, and one full block on Henry Street in Brooklyn, where we got to really go lean into the signage, look at all the different fonts that they used at the time, look at even the typeface. The typefaces they used then were very different from what we use now. The materials, we did a lot with plexi, and so I think the graphics were a big side of it. Edward didn't ever want to say this is January 5th of 1957. And I think it was such a smart move. He just said, why open ourselves up to the criticism where people can sort of nitpick every detail and when something was invented or if it was the year later. And so that has actually given us a lot of flexibility where there are a few things that we thought, like, okay, this is an absolutely stunning chair to have in Julian Minna's apartment, and maybe it was from 1962, but we can bleed with it a little bit if it's not spot on, the late 50s. And so I think that kind of gave us a little bit of flexibility so that it felt like could be somewhere in the world of the 50s, somewhere in the world of the early 60s. But we also really we looked at a lot of 1940s references, and a lot of my original research was New York from the 30s and 40s. And we looked at Chinatown, which has a 40s aesthetic, and so I think embracing that too has kind of helped to give it almost, even though it's clearly period, almost gives it a little bit more of a timelessness to it, which has been really nice. We wanted to make sure, of course, the architecture felt pre 1960 as much as we could. And for the store frontage, as much as we could, things that were unaltered and didn't have, brand new aluminum and glass finishes everywhere. So try to avoid that as much as we could. I loved it whenever we went into an old brownstone or an old townhouse and it still had all the old pre-war molding or layers and layers of paint. And so we got very lucky with our dilapidated brownstone where Lionel follows Laura in when they're out in Brooklyn, and he sort of slides in from the under the stairs, from under the stoop entry, and gets inside. So that was almost as is that location. We were really lucky with that. The biggest one that we're working on now is the L&L agency, where Lionel and all the guys work, and that was Frank Minna's base. And so we decided to build that one because we're in there for almost 6 days. It's the set that we spend the most time in by far of any of the other sets of the show. And there was just a lot of choreography and a lot of layout that really needed to be specific for a few vantage points from the window, or different views that we wanted to have out the windows behind Lionel when he's sitting at Frank's desk, and it needed a dark room, and there were just enough pieces to it that we thought this was a really good one to customize. He is very hands-on in absolutely the best way possible. As much as people think Edward Norton was born to act, that man is also born to direct. He is phenomenal. He's incredibly clear. He knows what he wants. He has fantastic taste, but yet he's also incredibly flexible and rolls with the punches and understands if we can't do certain things, and he pivots quickly and figures out ways to make what you can give him work. And he just has a fantastic eye. We'd show up at locations and he would in a matter of moments, he would just figure out the absolute best way to capture it, and things that even all of us may have missed. And I'm a cinematographer myself, the producers, and then his eye just picks things out very quickly. He has really interesting and stylized ways of approaching some of the scenes, like the dream sequences, the way that he's imagining opening into those, and then using those when Lionel is when you see Lionel first become intoxicated and fall back onto his bed, and the way that he wants to transition from that into this sort of beautiful floating dream sequence. It's all just from his imagination, and it's to have a director who's as visionary as that, and who can sort of just come up with absolutely beautiful and unique ways of delivering a scene or weaving a story. That is 100% coming from him.